Mike. Well, you know, as the torture issue is a huge debate right now, in your opinion, is it always wrong to torture?
Absolutely, it's always wrong to torture. I mean, number one, it's just illegal. So even if you don't have moral qualms with it, it's against the law, both domestic law and international law. And it's, you know, just not, there are so many reasons why it's wrong. It's ineffective, number one. I mean, you can't rely on the information you get, which is exactly why it's banned. I mean, if it produced reliable information, that might be a different issue, but it doesn't, and we have hundreds of years, thousands of years of people torturing one another to show that it doesn't, and we know it doesn't. And then the other side of that is what it does in the rest of the world when a country that is a leader in human rights issues, typically the United States, engages in a practice that we abhor when it's done by countries abroad, and the damage that does to our reputation. And from my own experience, having worked inside terrorist groups, it's exactly what the terrorists want you to do to them. And if you read the Al-Qaeda training manual, it repeatedly suggests that if you're ever captured, number one, you will be tortured, but when you get to any sort of courtroom, report the manner that you've been tortured, because they realize that that is the perfect example of abuse of authority, that there is no more perfect example of abuse of authority than torture, the mistreatment of a helpless prisoner. So they want to present themselves as victims, and this gives them the opportunity to do that.
Right,
so,
absolutely.
So, that was a published document back in before 2000. So clearly the government should have known that this would be an issue, and rather than create a system that had transparency and ensured the rule of law would be followed, they created a system that didn't have any transparency, giving the opportunity for false allegations of torture. And of course, when those allegations turned out to have a factual basis, it was all the worse.
Right.
And it was really a counterproductive way of going about it, and worked just the way the terrorists would have wanted it to work, by making them the victims in a situation where, by their conduct alone, they would not have been seen that way.
Right. And specific to waterboarding, I mean, we do have some experience here with this. Isn't it true that we've prosecuted both Americans and foreign citizens for the use of waterboarding in the past as a war crime? Absolutely.
I mean, it was something that traces its history to the Spanish Inquisition, so it's nothing new. And Japanese during the World War II, Japanese were charged with war crimes for having used that on U.S. people. In the Vietnam War, a U.S. military official was prosecuted or court-martialed for using this technique. And domestically in Texas, there were actually law enforcement authorities prosecuted for using that technique in torturing criminal suspects. So, there's a long history. It's interesting that
we're having the debate all over again. So much of the media is still using that term as an enhanced interrogation technique, right, rather than an out-and-out war crime.
Right, and it's interesting, that the focus is so much on waterboarding when, it's been documented since I think 2006 or 2007 that there are over 100 deaths in custody. So even if you took the John Yoo definition that, death or severe bodily injury, I think he said organ failure type of pain, a lot of them died, including I think 27 that were deemed homicides. So, clearly by anyone's definition, there was torture going on in these detention centers.
Right, so obviously waterboarding isn't the worst of what we've seen. Specifically, can you list some of the other things that are going on?
Well, there's all sorts of physical abuse, to the point of killing people, and there are pictures of Abu Ghraib, of an individual who was actually killed during his interrogation. But, one thing that's also incorporated into the Geneva Conventions is psychological abuse and psychological torture, and a lot of the methods that were used that don't seem as bad as physical abuse, like sleep deprivation and other sorts of psychological tortures, isolation, those sorts of things were certainly ongoing, and are just as much torture as the physical abuse.
Right. Why do you think that Obama has recently, moved back on his position to release the photos? from Guantanamo Bay. Do you think it's truly the military pressure that he's feeling, or is there something else going on?
I think there is certainly a resistance on the part of a bureaucratic infrastructure that's been politicized over the last 8 years that is hard to turn around very quickly. And I think that's one of the dangers of the way the previous administration went about politicizing sort of the rank and file and the mid-level bureaucracy of these agencies, because as in the way government operates today, those bureaucrats wield an awful lot of power, and it makes it very difficult for somebody to change the policies. So I think there is a lot of internal pressure to maintain the status quo and to not change things. Certainly the pictures are going to be horrible, and what I think the people who argue that it will cause problems miss the point. The problem was caused by the behavior.
Right.
That the photographs are evidence of. The people we did that to know it. They're not going to be surprised by these pictures. The only people who are going to be surprised are the American public, who have been told over and over again that these enhanced interrogations were done in, a pristine manner in clinical, in a handful of cases. And I think when they see that's not the case, that there are thousands of pictures, and this was pervasive and part of the logical consequence of policy decisions that were made here in Washington, they will demand accountability. And I think that's what is actually the bureaucracy is trying to avoid.
Right, right. Much of the GOP, including Dick Cheney, is justifying the use of torture because of the information that we've obtained thwarting future attacks. How do you respond to that argument?
Well, it's interesting how information that's out there can be manipulated and turned so much. I mean, one of the ones that they constantly bring up as providing reliable information is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was one of the planners of the alleged planners of the 9/11 attacks. But in the 9/11 Commission report, buried in a footnote is the title of the CIA analysis of his interrogations. And the title of the analysis is Precious Truth Surrounded by a Bodyguard of Lies, which makes it pretty clear that even the CIA didn't believe he was telling the unvarnished truth. And that's the problem with torture, that even if you do get some pieces of truthful information, you also get so much false information that you're unable to distinguish between the two. And it's going to send you on all sorts of false paths, and also perhaps make you miss something that actually was true because it's surrounded by a bodyguard of lies,
right,
and you can't get to it.
Right.
So, clearly the information, and not to mention the fact that, one of the memos from the Department of Justice that was recently released indicated that he had been waterboarded, I think, 183 times. So if waterboarding works, it should have worked on the first time. The idea that they would have to do it 183 times makes it pretty clear that they knew it wasn't working.
Right.
And that was just in 1 month.
Wow.
So.
Amazing.
And, even if you were to believe that waterboarding in and of itself wasn't abusive, 183 times in a month by anyone's measurement would be abusive and would constitute torture.
Absolutely.